I forgot my passport, but when I heard my husband upstairs in our mansion I stopped cold. It all started one summer morning that was supposed to be perfect. The kind of morning when everything seems calm before a storm you never see coming. My husband Ethan and I were leaving for Paris. It was our 10th anniversary and he had planned a surprise trip. He said he wanted to make up for how distant he had been lately. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Our mansion sat on the edge of the lake surrounded by tall trees and silence. Ethan had left early to make sure everything was packed. I was in a rush. My suitcase was by the door, my heels clicked on the marble floor and I kept checking the time. The car was waiting outside. Just as I was about to step out I realized something was missing. My passport. I froze for a second then sighed. Typical me. I rushed back inside heading straight upstairs to our bedroom. Halfway up the staircase I heard something that made my stomach twist. A sound. Soft laughter. A woman's laughter. It came from our bedroom. At first I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe the TV was on. But then I heard Ethan's voice. Low. Intimate. Too intimate. My heart began to pound so loud I thought they might hear it. I walked up slowly, careful not to make a sound. I reached the top of the stairs and stopped at our bedroom door. It was slightly open. The sound of whispers and movement came from inside. I pushed the door open just enough to see. And what I saw burned itself into my memory forever. Ethan was in bed with another woman. She was wearing my silk robe. The one he gave me on our honeymoon. He was laughing with her the same way he used to laugh with me. For a moment I couldn't move. The world seemed to tilt. Then something inside me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned around and walked back down the stairs. My mind was no longer fogged with love or pain. It was crystal clear. In that silence I decided something. I was not going to confront him. I was going to destroy him. That night I packed only what I needed and left. I didn't tell him I saw anything. I sent a text saying I had to stay behind because of work and that he should go to Paris without me. He replied with a casual okay and a heart emoji. That was the moment I knew I had been married to a stranger. Ethan was rich, but most of the wealth came from my side of the family. My father had trusted him and made him a partner in his business before he passed away. I was the only heir, but I had signed most documents believing Ethan was my soulmate. I gave him power over everything. That was my biggest mistake. But mistakes can be corrected when you stop being blind. I started collecting everything I could. Bank records, emails, messages with clients. Ethan was sloppy. He had hidden affairs, business secrets and shady deals all mixed together. He was slowly stealing from the company. My father's company. I played my part perfectly. I smiled at dinners, acted loving in public and even sent him good-night texts when he was away. He never suspected I knew. Every smile was a lie and every touch was a step closer to revenge. 3 months later I invited Ethan to a private dinner at the mansion. I told him it was to celebrate a new business deal. He came home dressed in his best suit with that smug smile I once found charming. The same smile that now made me sick. The table was set perfectly. Candles, wine, his favorite meal. I wore the same robe he had given me. When he walked in he said I looked beautiful and tried to kiss me. I smiled and let him. It was the last moment he would ever think he was in control. Over dinner I asked him about Paris. He said it was amazing but not the same without me. He said he missed me. I looked him straight in the eye and said I knew. His hand froze halfway to his glass. I reached into my bag and placed a stack of photos on the table. Photos of him with the other woman. In our bed. In Paris. Even in my car. His face went pale. He tried to speak but I stopped him. I told him I didn't care about the affair. I cared about what he stole. The millions he had moved from the company accounts into his private ones. The fake signatures. The offshore accounts. I had it all. His voice cracked as he tried to deny it, but I had already sent copies of everything to the board of directors that morning. The police were next. I told him he had 2 choices. Either he confessed and handed everything back or he could try to run and lose everything including his freedom. He looked at me with hate then fear. He tried to plead saying he loved me and made mistakes. I stood up and told him love was never supposed to feel like betrayal. Then I walked away, leaving him sitting there surrounded by his own lies. The next week was chaos. The news broke about Ethan's fraud. His reputation collapsed overnight. The other woman vanished as quickly as she had appeared. I didn't even bother finding out her name. She was just a shadow in a story that ended with him losing everything. Ethan was arrested. During the trial he tried to blame me, saying I was behind the fraud. But every document, every message proved otherwise. He was sentenced to several years in prison. After the verdict I visited him one last time. He sat behind the glass, pale and broken. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. I told him I didn't come for closure. I came so he could see what happens when you betray someone who trusted you completely. Then I stood up and left without another word. I rebuilt everything. The company, the mansion, my life. I sold the bed, the robe, and everything that reminded me of him. For the first time in years I felt peace. Not happiness exactly, but peace. One evening months later I stood by the lake watching the sunset. The air was quiet again. I thought about that morning I forgot my passport. How one small moment had revealed everything. Sometimes fate works in strange ways. If I hadn't gone back upstairs I might have spent the rest of my life living a lie. I smiled to myself and whispered thank you to whatever force made me forget my passport that day. Because that mistake saved me. It showed me the truth and gave me the strength to take back my life. But the story didn't quite end there. A year later I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo of me standing outside the mansion, taken from a distance. On the back were just 3 words. You ruined me. I didn't panic. I didn't tell anyone. I simply locked the doors that night and sat by the window looking out into the darkness. I knew Ethan couldn't have sent it. He was still behind bars. Someone else must have done it. Maybe one of his business partners or someone he owed money to. Either way I wasn't afraid. Because revenge has a strange power. Once you face your worst fear, nothing else can truly hurt you. I had already walked through fire and survived. Years later, when I finally moved out of the mansion and into a smaller place near the city, I left behind every trace of that life. I started a new business helping women rebuild after betrayal. I told my story only once at a private conference. People called it inspiring. They said I was brave. But I didn't feel brave. I just refused to be a victim. Now whenever I think about that day I forgot my passport, I realize it wasn't an accident. Maybe it was destiny giving me one last chance to open my eyes. To see what had been hidden behind the walls of that mansion. If there is one thing I learned, it's this. Revenge doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from clarity. From finally seeing people for who they are and deciding you won't let them win. I forgot my passport that morning, but what I found instead was far more important. I found myself.